Hello, I'm Mark Tucker.
Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
How's it going, Mark?
It is going well today.
Mark and I are both laughing because we are still trying out this new software and running into a few bugs still. I have a feeling we're going to, yeah, I have a feeling we'll be talking about this in a future episode, going into some more details.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Anyway,
we'll keep learning
it's
about
been
this.
this is going to be an interesting episode to work with. Um, what used to be known as Consumer Electronics Show and is now just known as CES. Usually, this is when we see a lot of cool stuff coming out. But I gotta tell you, I haven't seen a whole lot of cool stuff coming out. How about you?
Not really. I've been kind of busy, so haven't really had a chance to look. But I did see something that was kind of interesting. That got a little bit of buzz and kind of related to what we had talked about, kind of at the kickoff of this year, of some things that we might want to see. And so I thought it would be something interesting to talk about. What about you?
No, I've seen almost nothing interesting. When you brought this device to my attention, and then I started seeing it talked about everywhere. It really seems like it was about the only thing from the show that was really that interesting. So why don't you introduce it and talk about it a little bit?
All right. So what we're going to talk about is the Rabbit R1. R1 is the name. It is a device. It's about half the size of a phone, or like the palm of your hand. So it's basically square. It's got a plastic frame to it. It's got a touch screen. It has a single tap to talk button on the side, kind of like a walkie-talkie. It has a camera. It has speaker. It has far-field microphone, and it is a voice input output device that, yeah, in some ways is kind of like what you might get on a phone, or you might get on a voice assistant device like an Alexa Echo device. But it's different. It's got some sort of a AI foundational model built into it, and it's kind of touting it as a new device that is somewhat innovative, and we'll talk about kind of the details of that. But basically, think about it as a square phone with a touch screen, but it doesn't run apps. It responds to voice input and in some cases touch input and output.
Yeah, it's I mean the way they're kind of billing it is the saying the app model isn't good. It isn't, it doesn't serve us well. So we had to come up with a brand new model. And they kind of are pushing this as a conversational model, but not quite. Um, Different but the same. They made comments like, the phone isn't suitable for what we were trying to do, so we had to create this new device. I think that the thing you forgot to mention about it is it looks thick. It's kind of a chunky device.
Yes, it is.
In a lot of ways, it almost looks like a child's block. It's hard almost to take it seriously, but it also is fun and cool looking. It's got this rotating camera eye, so you can point the camera at you and point the camera at something else, or point the camera off. Um, so that's interesting. There are lots of interesting bits to it.
Yeah, it's kind of the well. One is it's orange, which is does seem like it make it seem like it's a little bit like a toy. It has an analog scroll wheel, so I guess if you're browsing through things, then you can use the scroll wheel. But there's not really a lot to it, and so you don't go to an app home screen and start an app. You press the talk button, you talk to it, and you get a response back. And what they're billing it as is, phones have become a distraction, and and kind of the app model is broken. It's been around for a long time. It's time for something new, and this new interface is voice input with AI models doing actions, getting things done for you, as opposed to like a chat bot or like Chat GPT, where it would be a large language model. They've got something that they tout as the large action model.
Right.
Is it
And
large? Yeah,
yes, large action model. And I think that's a clever way to pitch it.
yeah,
I'm not really, we'll talk about some of what's going under the hood in all of this in a bit, I think. Um, but I think they're attempting to do something that I think is clever in some ways, but also really, really challenging, and I'm not sure they pulled it off. When you listen to Adam Shire, who is one of the people behind Siri, the original Siri, um, talks about how you've got these things that are knowing things and doing things, and up until now, there's kind of been a big gulf between those two.
yeah.
You try to get ChatGPT to do something, and it doesn't. We've only seen little steps, little
Hmm.
inroads there. This looks like it's trying to say we can use large language models to do something. And I'm not convinced. But I but that's the goal.
Yeah,
And they made direct comparisons of themselves to Siri and Alexa and Cortana. If
yeah,
you're comparing yourself to Cortana, I think you got a problem here.
yeah. I think they were just trying to put themselves up against the big companies. Um, but
But they omitted one.
oops. Well, that is interesting. But so, kind of part of the reason why we're talking about it is the voice input output side of things. Another reason is that it really had a lot of buzz. So just this week, they sold out almost immediately of their first batch of 10,000 devices. So it's pre-order now. It's going to get shipped the end of March or into April. They sold out of their
I
second
looked at
batch of 10,000, and now they're on their third batch of 10,000. So you can still pre-order it, but it's got some buzz. It's $199.
and
No
I think that's part
subscription
of the
after
biggest
that.
right. I think that's part of the biggest reason why it's getting that kind of buzz is because, there are lots of people that are willing to say, I don't know, but it's only $200. How bad could it be for $200?
Right.
And so it's not you know glasses which look limited and they're $600. And that
Yeah.
was one of the things that was neat is they did this comparison at the end of their video presentation, saying look, we're comparing ourselves against phones which are 700 to $1,000.
Yeah.
We're comparing ourselves against smart speakers which are $200 and up. Not a great comparison there because you can get smart speakers for less, but okay. We're comparing ourselves against these brand new devices which can only do generative AI, and we can
Yep.
do stuff, and they're more. So that's a compelling argument. You said this is very much the technology that we've been kind of talked about the past a couple of shows, um, and I'm gonna put this question out first, but I don't want to answer it until later.
Okay.
And I'll point out that we are also a developer focused show. So the natural question is going to be, how do we as developers develop for this? But I'm going to hold off on that answer until later. Okay?
Okay.
So, what were some of the elements that they showed that captured you, that you thought were particularly compelling?
So part of the demo was like reserving or getting a ride share or ordering food. And some of it reminded me of Bixby, where you could define, like, my default ride share is going to be Uber, or my default place that I'm going to get pizza is from Pizza Hut, or so there is some preference configuration that you can do ahead of time and log in to those apps. And a preference, I think they called it the rabbit hole. If I remember,
Yes.
if I'm putting things together correctly. But you go to your settings in the rabbit hole, and you go ahead and set these different preferences. So then when you talk on the device, you can say, I want a ride. Then it doesn't necessarily, it already knows some of the preferences, and it already knows it's, behind the scenes it's running your app, or it's making, what it, not sure exactly what it's doing. It's not saying that it's running API calls, because there's a mode later that we'll talk about, which is called teach mode. But
Well,
but behind the scenes, you've logged into your Uber app already, and Rabbit Hole knows about it, and so now the device can talk to Uber and go ahead and order. And according to the demo, and hopefully the demo was a real demo and not just a a feature demo, but the speed of the interaction, of the voice input, the processing response, the action was actually pretty speedy. It was faster than anything that I've seen with large language models. So that's the thing that I was like, well, if this is true, then I'm interested on kind of what they're doing differently.
I'm very interested to know what they're doing differently. Um, but if you read their website, they do kind of hint about how they're doing some of this. Even though they're talking about the RabbitOS and so forth, they do say that, and he made a big deal about how you're logging in, but they're not creating fake accounts. They're not keeping your password. They don't see your login or password. And when they demonstrated some of these logins, I'm watching this and I'm going, that's an OAuth login. There's nothing magic about that.
Yeah.
They're not pulling a rabbit out of a hat, so to speak. That's an OAuth login, and you're authorizing it to access the API. They're using an API. And in fact, elsewhere on the website, when they talk about privacy and security, they say things like, we are not doing, we're not trying to break a website. We're not trying to violate how your website runs.
Right.
We're not trying to use unauthorized APIs. They're they're just doing things completely with APIs that are out there and that exist. So that's not magic.
Yeah, it's not magic, but I'm trying to kind of relate what you said and what's on the site versus another demo that's on the site that says, hey, for example, if you want to train Airbnb, and it's not an app that you can use, then at least the demo showed something side by side that says when you go to the website for Airbnb, you click on this, you type in the location here, you click on this, you set the number of people, you set the dates on the calendar control, you might do some filters. And at least what it's showing on the side screen is that, well, these are all things that are being highlighted, like this is the field that I'm entering into, and stuff. So I don't know if it's a combination of methods. So like experimental teach me mode is kind of more website app driven, like a automated testing tool might do, and kind of replay it, but then is smart about figuring out what different fields are. So maybe there are two different modes. Maybe the
Well,
main application mode is kind of more OAuth API driven, and this teach me mode is more automated testing driven with fields filled in by your voice from what you say.
right.
Maybe.
And I think that's kind of one of the things they kind of gloss over because they also said that
Yeah.
that teach mode is still experimental.
Yeah.
And one of the things though that teach mode reminded me of was something that Google demonstrated a bunch of years ago, and as part of Project Duplex, where you would be able to book a car by your voice,
Hold
and
on.
all. and all it did was go and interact with a generic, it knew what
Hmm.
car reservation websites looked like.
Just so everybody is reminded, so what is the current active status of Duplex?
Google canceled the project about 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, so, sorry, just wanted to bring that point out.
Well, no. It's important to bring up, but I think it's also important to ask why it was canceled. And Google hasn't told us why it was canceled. But
Right.
part of me wonders if at least part of it was that they were finding that they needed to train their large action model on more and more actions, and that unless you trained it on ones fairly well, it couldn't deduce how to do a website that it's never encountered before. I wonder if they're going to run into similar problems with teach mode. That, it might be okay for the things that are commonly used, but it's not, you know, like a large language model, we can toss something at it that in theory it's never seen before, and it will do something with it. Um, I'm kind of curious just how well we can do that with a website it's never seen before. Or it's,
Yeah.
and, so is it just screen scraping? Is it just, looking for the accessibility tags and doing something with those? Or is it, following my mouse clicks and seeing what I'm clicking on and making associations there? And we don't know. And maybe that this notion of group training, having enough people with the device that, want to train things and do things with it will be good. We'll do what Duplex couldn't do, or maybe they're going to run into a similar issues that Duplex ran into. I don't know.
So I have a different thought on that line, and partially I don't really care if Teach Me mode is generalized so that it can handle every application. I'm thinking of it more as a if this then that Zapier approach where maybe I can have it train activities that I care about, applications that aren't on their list yet, but are things that I care about, that I can train it. And maybe in that case, it will work fine in the limited cases for the limited list of websites that I use and add to my preferences, to my rabbit hole. If that's the case, I would be happy with that.
So you would be happy with having to teach it how to do everything.
I would be happy if one, its base functionality handled a lot of cases that I care about, and for those edge cases that it doesn't, that I could train it specially for those cases. Yeah, I would train it once if it was something that I could use multiple times over and over again. If it was something I used every day, once a week, once a month, yeah, I would train it once. And
Okay. So I get, and this starts getting into the question of how do you program for it? And the answer is you don't.
yeah,
You teach it. But it's
you
also
teach it. Yeah,
saying now that if I want a spreadsheet, I need to teach it how to do a spreadsheet. If I want it to send email, I need to teach it how to send email. I need to teach it for everything that I like to do.
yeah.
How is this different than an app model where I have to program the app every time?
Because you have a nice orange device that you can talk to. And I'm not sure if the end game of this is really the device, or if there were some limitations of having this in the app store that it couldn't do that, or it needs to do more than what an app can do in an app store, or they didn't just want a Chrome extension. I'm wondering if the long term is if they really are in the device game, or if in the end they're using the device to get data to improve the model, and in the end they'll be selling access to the model.
Well, they said they went, they essentially had a contractor build the device for them. So the company itself is clearly a software company. And he made this statement about how, there are limitations of apps and we couldn't do this with apps. But it really wasn't clear to me why. I mean, nothing that he
Yeah.
demonstrated, nothing that was demonstrated can't be done in an app on a phone. I didn't see anything. I just didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Especially given that everything that is done on the Rabbit isn't done on the device. It's done somewhere in the cloud.
Yeah. It did seem like that, the device itself was, I don't know, spinning up some sort of a, instance to do the processing for that task, and then, giving you the response back.
Which is fine. I'm not expecting more from a $200 device, but it does now start saying that, okay, they're doing this. It's clear they're doing it in the cloud. They say they're doing it in the cloud on the website, but there's no subscription fee. So I don't know where they're planning on making money to sustain this operation.
Yeah, that is interesting. Also, like, how do you connect to it? I didn't hear any discussion about Wi-Fi per se. It
I
did
thought
say it did say a SIM card.
I thought it said it had Wi-Fi.
We'll take a look at that, but the UI seemed fairly simple. It was, voice input. There were some display of simple information, maybe a list of information, a page of information, a form of some sort with a button that you could click instead of, click to, tap to confirm. But I wonder if behind the scenes, if it's just using HTML, or maybe it's APL. I don't know.
Ooh. I think it's a fair point. And the interface is probably one of the best things about this, is that it's
Yeah.
very much a voice interface, but, it switches to visual with the touch confirmation after it's done a bunch of work. So it says, I've booked you a ride, I've got a ride, click to confirm. So it doesn't try to, it works with that dual modality really nicely, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
it does.
Similarly with the camera, you can, and this was again something that Google demoed but hasn't followed through with. You can point a camera at something and ask questions about what you're looking at, and
Yeah.
it has that context, and I think that's really, really powerful. I can't think of anything else that's really doing that kind of context questioning and conversational yet. This is really the first one that seems like it's doing it.
Yeah, and it did try to keep the text minimal. Some interesting things on the website was showing comparisons to from their large action model, and the number of tokens that it needs to understand like a website or something, compared to like the large number of tokens that are needed for a large language model. So I don't know, what foundationally is different on how that model is trained, but it is different. It's not what they're at least trying to express is that it's not an image. It's not like they're looking at an image of the app or the website and then figuring out things, and it's not using a text description of the web page. It's using something else, and I don't know. Is it looking at, like in the case of an HTML document or a website? Is it looking at the HTML and the tags and the ARIA and all that stuff to
I
try to figure it out? I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know either, but looking at the aria makes a lot of sense. It
Yeah.
seems like a reasonable way to do it. And I think this goes into what they're calling their neurosymbolic model. They're being buzzwordy, but that's okay. And to me, that sounds like they're saying we are pre-training it on a bunch of things. So we're giving it specific specific intents. I love how they used intent all over the place.
Tense. Yeah.
We're giving it specific phrases that will match intents, but where those fail, we're going to fall back on an LLM. So that's a way that they can speed things up, save on tokens,
Yep.
pre-process some stuff, and not need to process other stuff. I think it's a really clever approach, a really clever hybrid approach that lots of
Yeah.
people are talking about, but not a lot of people are doing.
Right. I'll give you some quotes, and I kind of want your impression on some of these quotes from the website. So they said that the
Okay.
large action model is a new type of foundation model that understands human intentions on computers.
I like the intention angle there. And I think that's an illustration of what I mean when I say, they're merging an intent based model and a language based model. So they can clearly define those intents, and make those clearly actionable things. But they've also got this language model backup that they can use when the predefined intents fail.
Yeah, I wonder if they're using some open source currently available LLM or if they've done their own.
I don't know. I don't know. One could argue either way.
Yeah,
And note they haven't said either way.
yeah, that's true. They have not. All right. So another quote: "We have developed a system that can infer and model human actions on computer applications, perform the actions reliably and quickly, and is well suited for deployment in various AI assistants and operating systems."
Well, I think the latter part of that is the interesting bit to me, is they're saying this device is not the end device. We're looking to deploy RabbitOS in a variety of other places. So it seems to me that their end game is to have other device manufacturers come to them and say, we have a robot and we need an OS for it, and we think your OS is the right one for it. What was the first part of that again?
So we have developed a system that can infer and model human actions on computer applications. So it can model human interactions, perform the
Okay,
actions
so stop
reliably
that.
and quickly.
Infer and model human actions. Again, that to me sounds like it's an
Yeah.
intent based system.
Mm-hmm.
And it maps an intent, maybe a dynamic intent, but an intent, or a user created intent, but an intent to, uh, I will call it an API, but that's an API that may be a form on a web page. Because that's kind of a form of an API, if you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to trivialize that, to be clear. That's, lots of people have talked about doing stuff like that, but nobody's done it.
Yeah, because you can think about like on a web page, you can figure out what a form is. You could post to the form with filled in, encoding of your of your
Right.
fields and submit that to the server, right? So maybe that is a type of API that they can work with.
And I think that's what the teach mode is doing. At least I'm kind of, if I had to reverse engineer, if I had to
Yeah.
engineer this myself, knowing that it's been done, what I would do with teach mode is track what elements on a page are being interacted with. And I could track that on the HTML level, which again is not to make it sound, I'm not meaning to trivialize this, because
Yeah.
people have done this or have tried to do it, and you don't see it a lot. So if they've been able to pull it off, that's cool.
All right. So something else about the neurosymbolic is they were talking about, I would have to do more research to understand what they mean by neuro and what they mean by symbolic. But some of the stuff that on the site was saying if our model is used in neuro mode only, then it's either slower or less accurate than if it's combined with this the symbolic nature of it. So they've got some interesting. If you dig onto the website, there's kind of a research page. They give a little bit of detail. They do reference some articles, but I think that's more general. It's not probably anything specific about what their secret sauce is. But at least
Well,
it kind of gives you an understanding of the nomenclature or how they're perceiving the problem that might be a little different than others.
well, and again, Brett Kinsella broke this part down a little bit, and he points out that what that means is that you're combining deep learning systems, which is one set of AI tools, with rules-based systems, i.e., our intents again. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
different set of AI tools. And it's not so much incompatible, but they're different approaches to it. Trying to do both in a hybrid way is not terribly new, but pulling it off, is good. There are other tools that have tried to do similar things. Uh, and again, it's not bad. It's leveraging technologies that do two kind of different things to fill in the gaps where the other one falls short.
Yeah.
So the symbolic part is more controlled, whereas the neuro part are more of the ambiguity, the very the stuff that we're used to with
Yeah.
LLMs.
Yeah.
And the reason why, if you were just doing an LLM part, it's slower because we have that experience, but they're relying on the fact that they can pre-train it for a bunch of specific things, so you get those intent shortcuts.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
We know from our experience with voice agents that the slow part wasn't intent detection. That's usually pretty fast.
Yeah.
It needed to be. It's the taking action on the intent part that was slower. And this is actually one thing where I want to mention this before I forget it, that I think they do a much better job than what any of the voice agents to date have been doing. In some of their demos, when you said things like, I need to book an Uber, it replied immediately saying, okay, I'm working on that. And then came
Yeah.
back eventually and said, here's what I've done. So it breaks. And this is nothing, this is big, I think.
Yeah.
That it gets away from the request response model, which
Yeah. It breaks the 7-second dependency on a response.
right. Well, and it does that definitely, but it does that by essentially saying, I'm going to reply to you immediately, so that you know that I'm working on something. So you know I'm working.
Yeah. I've heard you.
I've heard you. I'm acknowledging that. But then I, as the user, don't have to do anything else for it to eventually come back to me and say, and now here's the result. That's got to be like one of the most common questions we used to get with Google Assistant, and we had hacky ways to work around it with Assistant. And it's still one of we're getting that even more now on Alexa, and there's no really good way to do that on Alexa. I mean, it's even hackier, and it's not natural. What Rabbit is doing is a much more natural conversation way of handling that problem, to their credit.
I agree, and it's actually because I've gone back and looked at, and I don't know why I brought it to my mind, but if you look at Star Trek and the interaction that they have with the computer there, it's not necessarily a conversation. It's go do this, and the computer responds back when it's ready, when it's done its processing, when it's evaluated, it's looked at the sensors, when it's done whatever it's needs to do, then it gets back to you.
That's an excellent point and a great example. We always love to use the Star Trek computer as the example. And I think that's it, is, Rabbit is saying, we're breaking the app model. I don't think they're breaking the app model, but what I do think they did is they broke the old conversation model. And I think that's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah, because if in the end, if what they're running against are apps and the APIs that apps need, then those still need to exist. I think,
Well,
um,
and
or at least in the
this is
short
kind of
term.
right, and this is kind of the question. It's the open issue that they kind of skirted around. Again, it goes back to why is the app model broken? They didn't really say that. They kind of hinted at, apps don't really talk to each other, and that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But none of their demos really addressed the building an agent issue. They
Yeah.
kind of addressed that in they had a demonstration about travel. They said this long run on sentence of I want to take a flight between these dates and these dates with my kids age this and that. The that was a really uh, loaded opening sentence, which as a conversation designer I was screaming. Because that's one of the we like to use this as an example, but that's not how people talk. And then somewhere behind the scenes it went and booked those reservations, or prepared a bunch of reservations.
Prepared, yeah.
Now, was it using that with one, was it using Expedia's API to do that? Or was it going to a bunch of different travel
Yeah.
sites and doing that?
Yeah.
And they left that ambiguous, which is okay. And then, then he said, oh, and plan an itinerary for that. And that's when it went to an LLM and, planned an itinerary. So you don't quite see those connections. At one point, Alexa was talking about how, you'd be able to book a reservation with OpenTable and then say, oh, and I'll need a car for that. And it would go and book a ride with Uber. At least that was the theory. I don't think that ever
Yeah.
worked. I'm waiting to see how well this really works.
That's true. So, two more things. First off, so on their website and from their video, so watch the keynote video, and you'll see a number of different things. But they talk about these are the areas where they see this device, or more aptly, this concept of a RabbitOS being used. And they talk about some of the big things that people use right now their voice assistants for, but also what they use their phones for. So music, rideshare, food ordering, finding things on a map, reservations, tickets, shopping, travel, and then they talk a little bit about generative AI. At least they list those things. So I think that's kind of the world we talked about. I don't know that we need to really discuss that much more, but that's kind of completes that list.
There's one thing, though, I thought that was interestingly missing from that list. And it's the thing that is probably the most popular thing that voice agents are used for today, and that's smart home control.
Yes. So it didn't talk about smart home control. Didn't talk about reminders. Didn't talk about calendar. Right.
Didn't talk about calendar. It didn't talk about text messaging. And text messaging is definitely the thing that phones are used for the most.
Yep.
When I used my glass on a regular basis, texting was what I was using it the most for. It has a camera, but it can't take pictures. They don't mention pictures anywhere.
Yeah.
There are a lot of interesting open questions here.
Yeah. All right. Ready for the second thing?
Ready for the second thing.
So let's circle back to the question that you asked towards the beginning: is monetization, or what is
yes.
it? What's in it for developers? So what do you think?
Is this a question you're posing to me, or you want to answer it too?
I am posing your question right back to you, because I'm not sure. I did see something that talked about a store, but I don't know what that meant.
Well, as is always the case, we don't know what that means until it launches. And even
Totally see
then,
it.
we probably don't know what it means. But they kind of hinted that as part of teach mode, you would be able to teach it stuff, teach it how to do things, and then be able to share that. And as part of sharing that in the store, there would be monetization and, a lot of vague hand waving going on there.
Yeah.
Just like, everyone else does vague hand waving with those sorts of things.
Right.
Uh, and it's again going to be interesting because there's no subscription. So where is the monetization going to be coming from? I don't know. Once again, as with every time we talk about a store, there are tons and tons of questions there. I think the notable thing here, however, is that they're not talking about an API. They're not talking about building apps because they're getting away from apps, although what these things you're teaching it are, if not apps, I don't know. So the role of the developer here is very, very different.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's very, very different. We'll see. So are you getting one?
I've gone back and forth on that. I was like, oh, I think I'm going to wait until the first ones come out and people start actually talking about it after using it. I don't know if it's $200 is still $200 to me. I can I can do a number of things with that. It's not just throwaway money for me. But I don't know. I am interested. I do want to just kind of get an idea of how responsive it is. And if it is fairly responsive, then I'd say yeah. I think I might get one and kind of see where it goes.
I am curious. I feel like my biggest issue is it doesn't meet any of my usage criteria. I don't see myself using it in many cases. Whereas glasses and a device on my desk, I did see immediate uses for. One thing, and that actually reminds me of one of the things that I find most interesting about the device and about their presentation of the device is several of the things that they pitched as features, as benefits. I look at and I go, that was only there to compensate for design issues. So they touted the fact that it was push to talk. It wasn't always. It's not always listening. Um, Pushing that as a big feature, and I get how you can push that as a big feature. But at the same time, that also means they didn't need to build in expensive hot word detection. They didn't need
Yep.
to figure out how to do that. But that reduces its usefulness to me because it means I need to go press a button in order to do something, which
Yeah.
I like my voice models, ubiquitous and ambient. It gets away from
Yeah.
that ubiquitous and ambient model. Presenting, you go to the rabbit hole and sign in, and we don't keep your username and password. Well, okay, they just touted OAuth as a feature, which, okay, but lots of other, that's literally what OAuth was designed to do.
Well, and OAuth, tokens do expire. So, how often do you have to visit the rabbit hole and relog back in?
Right. So saying, look, you can, you go to the rabbit hole and you authorize your favorite apps. Well, okay, but that's literally what it was designed to do, and yeah. So things that they're touting as big features are design workarounds, and I'm okay with that because there's lots of stuff sitting on my desk that, as a feature, was a
Yeah.
design workaround. But it's interesting, and their sales pitch was very good on that front.
So even though its small though chunky form factor does seem to indicate that it's something that you would take with you, right? And the fact that you can have a SIM card means that it's something that is mobile on the go. So you would use it in some cases instead of a phone. And you're right. I did also think about the button gets rid of the fact that you have to do wake words, but it's got a far-field microphone on it, and so I don't know why it would need a far-field microphone if you've got to, hold and talk to it. And it didn't seem like there was any mention of, earplugs or, any phone jack or earphone jack. So then now you're in a situation where you can only use it in places where you want to be heard when you talk and you want to have the response be heard to those that are around you, right?
Well, he did say that you could do something to bring up a keyboard, but he didn't demonstrate that.
Oh, he did say, yeah, I did say that. So I wonder if you do that mode, if it does not do text to speech, it just does text response, display only response.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
So, lots of questions. I think we're lots of people I know are interested, but waiting on somebody else to get one first.
Yeah. I think that's true. And it also kind of depends on what it can do, and two, how often do you do those things that it can do would indicate if you should get it or not.
Yep. So if there are folks out there, if you are one of the ones who are getting one, we would love to talk to you come March or April. Really get into it. And maybe we will have you as a guest host on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark. Have a great week.
Thank you.